She is our keynote speaker. Dr. Kreysar has a PhD in higher educational leadership, a Master's of Science in secondary education, and a Bachelor of Arts in history. For the past 6 years, she has taught social studies and the gifted program in the West Shore School District. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kreysar.
All right, I'm used to yelling over middle schoolers, so hopefully I'm not too loud here. I've been teaching social studies for many years now, and I've learned that a lot of students are unfamiliar with the founding of our country and all of its nuances. I don't expect them to come into my classroom knowing the details of the 27 amendments or every significant battle of the Civil War. And I definitely don't make them memorize the Gettysburg Address and recite it in front of the class like I have to do. But I do expect them to understand a bit about our country. For example, what is the Constitution? You don't have to raise your hand, I'm not quizzing you now, don't worry. But I want to dive into our country's founding just a little bit. Take July 4th, Independence Day. What are we celebrating with America's 250th birthday? Some might say it's the founding of the country and the creation of our nation's government, but that's not really it. We're not celebrating the American Constitution. That was ratified in 1788, not 1776. We're not really celebrating the country's first government because that was under the Articles of Confederation, which were created prior to the Constitution we use now. We aren't celebrating the president. In fact, the executive branch didn't even exist in the Articles of Confederation. So we didn't have a president until 10 plus years after the Declaration of Independence. What we're really celebrating is essentially the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which didn't form a government, but it rather solidified an idea of what a country could be. See, at the start of the Revolutionary War, it wasn't about separating from Great Britain and not being colonies anymore. We were essentially mad at King George and wanted our taxes to be fair. The idea of someone across the Atlantic taxing our colonies without any type of representation infuriated everyone. And it got them thinking about what was possible. Could the 13 colonies unite together and somehow govern themselves? Did they need a king on this side of the ocean with a new kingdom of the United States to rule over? Or maybe, just maybe, a different type of government could be possible. By 1776, the Founding Fathers had solidified an idea of a new country with a new form of leadership that didn't rely on a king or queen. It wasn't passed down from father to son, and power wasn't taken by force and bloodshed, ruling by fear and violence. Instead, they pictured a government that was representative of the people, created by the people, and functioning for the people. For centuries, countries had been ruled by kings and queens, or whoever had the biggest army. The 13 colonies had their own small governments, but they were technically owned by Great Britain and King George. At times, it was difficult for the colonies to be united. You might think that one or two of them would fight for the power that King George had. And they kind of did. But that wasn't the case, necessarily. When Thomas Jefferson and others penned the Declaration of Independence, they were bringing an idea to life. And all of the details were really hazy, but the main idea was there. The colonies would be their own country, ruled by some type of democratic government. And in a world where monarchies were the norm, the idea of sharing a ruling power among men who would be voted into office and not stay there forever was, for lack of a better term, revolutionary. Now, when we talk about the revolution and the 4th of July and Independence Day, we tend to think of soldiers fighting against the redcoats, Mel Gibson's The Patriot, dumping tea into Boston Harbor, maybe even Hamilton, right, the soundtrack, the musical. But I want to take a moment and highlight another revolutionary concept at that time that's much less well known. You see, women are often placed on the back burner in history because so much of it is patriarchal, which is a conversation for another time. We use the term Founding Fathers to refer to a large group of men beyond just the 56 signers of the Declaration. There's no such term as founding women. Right? Instead, we get this sprinkling in of specific women who stand out, like Martha Washington, who was the first lady, or Deborah Sampson, who disguised herself as a man so she could join the war and fight. But at the time of the Revolutionary War, there was also a new role that was created for women. See, the founding fathers feared their experiment with a new government would fade from the minds of the people soon after they were gone, or perhaps even during their lifetimes. This democratic republic was truly an experiment, for nothing else in the world was really like it. Fighting a war against a tyrannical king was one thing, but creating and keeping a brand new government alive was a completely different type of battle. What was the solution? How could the idea of independence stay in the minds of citizens beyond 1776? Abigail Adams famously wrote to her husband when she heard the Continental Congress had declared independence. She was not allowed to participate in any type of representative, but we do know that John Adams discussed politics with her. In this particular letter, Abigail asked that the men remember the ladies, and she was onto something. Women were the solution to keeping this new idea alive. Society began to shift their view of mothers and acknowledge all their influence on shaping the youth. Mothers were the perfect people to teach their children about the new ideas of the revolution and keep this dream alive. They could keep the mindset going from generation to generation and help create citizens of this new country. In the 1970s, historian Linda Kerber coined a term of Republican motherhood, and it describes the political role that opened up to women during the time of the Revolutionary War and beyond. Women's position in society in the 1700s was, as you might have guessed, not great. Women could not vote, nor would they be able to for another 120 years. They were not sent to school, but instead learned from their parents who hopefully were literate enough to teach them. They could not hold political office. They could not join the army as soldiers. In fact, married women couldn't even own property. There wasn't much they could do except get married and have children. But now, that job is a whole lot more important. Women were recognized as the ones who would keep the country, specifically that idea of our new country, alive in the next generation. This Republican motherhood didn't just apply solely to mothers either. Women as a whole began to be more educated. Colleges for women opened up. Girls were no longer just taught in the home. They could be sent to young ladies' academies to learn things like math, geography, reading, writing, and even civics. This is a revolutionary idea, that women could and should be educated in things like civics and government so that they can teach their children, especially their sons, what it means to be a good citizen of the United States. See, men had lit the spark, but now it was the women who were tasked with keeping the flame alive for generations to come. And although it would be decades before things began to be politically equal for the genders, this is still a big step. Women were now viewed as having a functioning political place in society, and it led to the opening of many opportunities. They looked to promote social justice and improve the lives of all humans, whether they were voting citizens or not. We see women spearheading abolition, the movement to end slavery. The temperance movement has women at the helm, and that has to do with alcohol consumption, or too much of it, rather. Women's rights as a whole came about because of the women who fought for a fair place in society. As we celebrate America's 250th birthday, I want you to remember what we're really celebrating. When you light your fireworks, or don't, because there's a burn ban in certain places, so make sure you look that up. Remember your countrymen who had this idea years ago that 13 colonies could fight off the king and create an entirely new system of government where its own citizens had a say. So I encourage you to explore the ideas and events around our country's founding. Take 10 minutes from YouTube Reels and look up cool things about the United States, or maybe even watch some reels about the topic, because educational social media does exist. It's not that many people know, but it's out there. Regardless of how you choose to engage in our nation's history, we believe it's vital that we do engage with it somehow. Because it's not just up to the mothers to keep the idea of our nation alive anymore. It's all of our responsibility to understand the foundation of this country, the ideas behind it. You and I are the next generation to keep that torch of democracy burning.